Okay, Henry VIII.
Yeah, he new guy.
Number 20.
Dun, dun, dun.
Henry VIII. He was born in 1491, son of Henry VII and Elizabeth of York, neither of which are particularly noted, but obviously he was of royal lineage. In 1509, among much pomp and circumstance, he was married at Westminster Abbey to Catherine of Aragon and crowned king at Westminster Abbey. So if he had stayed married to Catherine of Aragon and had gone forward from that point, history, Western history at least, as we know it, would be radically different than it is today. 1516, Queen Catherine gives birth to Princess Mary, and there was still some lingering prejudice, even at that time, against English sovereigns being women. Hence the Empress Maud, a couple hundred years before, who was the granddaughter of William the Conqueror, who had to fight a civil war to try to claim her crown and was not successful in doing so. So Henry was not happy that Catherine had given birth to a little girl rather than a little boy. Although, of course, Princess Mary would eventually become Queen of England. 1520, Henry VIII publishes the Defense of the Seven Sacraments, refuting Luther, and he was named Defender of the Faith by the Pope. Oh, irony of ironies. So, the Seven Sacraments, of course, Luther had thrown all that out and said there were only two sacraments, baptism and supper, and there are seven sacraments in the Catholic Church. 1527 to 1529, Henry is becoming alarmed that Catherine is not producing an heir to the throne, and he seeks an annulment of his marriage to Catherine of Aragon from the Pope. The annulment is the reason the annulment is refused. It probably would have been accepted, except at this point in time, the Pope is kind of under the influence of the King of Spain. The King of Spain is the nephew, I believe, of Catherine of Aragon. And so you can imagine if the Pope thinks...
the daughter of, you know, Ferdinand and Isabella.
Yeah. So if you're the Pope and you're about to, sure, I'll give him an annulment, no skin off of my back, and then the guy who's paying your bill says, you're not doing that to Annie. You're not doing that to Annie Cathy, sorry. And so the annulment. So there are reasons for this. If that had not been the case, if the Pope was in Rome and all that, he would have granted an annulment in a heartbeat, but he was not able to. 1533, Henry marries his second wife, Anne Boleyn. I hope it is not a shock to any of you to know that Henry had probably been consorting with Anne Boleyn before the official marriage. I know, it's a shock to you. I know.
More consorting with her sister.
Yeah, that's true. She came first, but then Anne Boleyn second. Anne Boleyn gives birth to perhaps the greatest of all the English sovereigns.
Here, here.
And a person who will later become Queen of England for many decades and lead a period called the Golden Years. 1534, Henry VIII leads the passage of the Act of Supremacy. The Church of England is formed with the king as head, and this is really the reason he's in here and the reason he's number 20, is because really he's the first nation that essentially pulls out of the Catholic Church. It says, sorry, we're gone. We should not make the mistake, which people sometimes do, of thinking that Henry VIII was a big flaming Protestant, that he was a big fan of Luther or he was a big fan of Jean Calvin. He wasn't. A matter of fact, he was, while this is all going on, he's ordering Lutherans in his kingdom to be tracked down and killed. There was a little difficulty there because his wife, Anne Boleyn, was a secret practicing Lutheran and had actually communicated with Lutherans in Germany and all this stuff. But so he's not really a Protestant in the sense that we know of as Protestantism, but he was someone who pulled away from the Catholic Church at the same time that that Luther pulled away, that Calvin pulled away, that Zwingli pulled away. And all of this is happening simultaneously. So he tends to get lumped into the Protestant movement, even though he, from a theological standpoint, he becomes head of the church. The Queen of England today is still the head of the church.
God save the Queen.
God save the Queen.
Well, if you hadn't had a crook like Wolsey, you know, doing all his stuff, because, you know,
Or
his good
like,
friend Thomas More, bye, off with your head.
Yeah. So we could go into all that, but this isn't really meant to be an in-depth biography of Henry VIII, but rather to show why I have him on the list is because he took England to, he made England break away from the Catholic Church. So him, along with Luther, along with Calvin, along with Zwingli, helped reduce the power of the papacy and of the Catholic Church in Europe. 35, Sir Thomas More is beheaded for not publicly approving of the marriage of Henry VIII to his second wife. They've made two movies called A Man for All Seasons. One starred Paul Scofield,
Yes,
and the
that
other
was
starred
good.
Charlton Heston.
Charlton Heston?
The second one.
Oh.
1536, Henry orders his second wife, Anne Boleyn, executed. This is for treason, not because she was... 1536 to 1540, this, to me, would have put Henry on this list in all of his perfidy, whether or not he had broken away from the Catholic Church. Henry VIII and Thomas Cromwell systematically dissolved and destroyed the monasteries in England. They looted them, they stole all the gold and the vestments, and destroyed a lot of them. Glastonbury Abbey, which at one time was the largest abbey in England, was just decimated. I mean, you can see, how many of you have ever been to Glastonbury Abbey? You know, there's just a couple walls left. I mean, everything else. 1536, 1537, there's an uprising in the north of pro-Catholic forces within England. It's called the Pilgrimage of Grace. It's a protest of the dissolution of the monasteries and the casting off of Catholicism. But it's eventually suppressed by Henry. And I don't know if it's true or not, but in that the miniseries that was on a year ago on the Tudors.
It's still on. It's on BBC
the repeats
America.
are on.
Yeah.
There's not new ones. A little later, after the suppression, Henry makes a goodwill tour of the North to, you know, tell his subjects that they're welcome back and he's forgiven them and all this stuff. And I forget which one of his wives was with him, but he had just been married to one of the new wives. I don't remember which one. And she thought she was going to be the center of attention because she was now Queen of England. And the way they depicted it is they're riding into this town and there's people throwing flowers along the path. The only person, they don't care about Henry, they don't care about his wife, they care about Princess Mary because she's still a Catholic. And Henry turns to his wife and says, they're here to see my daughter, they're not here to see you. It was really great.
Yeah.
Must be Catherine Howard.
Yeah, that could be. 1547, Henry dies in the Palace of Whitehall. Now, there's some other things I could have mentioned in here. Henry did fight a few battles in France. He was desperate to show that he was a military leader as much as he was a king. But we are not talking Richard the Lionheart here. His battles were fairly minor and perhaps not run as well as So Henry dies in 1547. We should also mention that Henry, in his later years, had gotten a little large. But that's not the 20-year-old Henry. That's not the 25-year-old Henry. It was only in as he got old that he got kind of big. 1553 to 1558, Queen Mary gets her revenge. As the Klingon saying says, revenge is a dish best served cold. And Princess Mary becomes Queen Mary, and she reestablishes Catholicism in England. At least 300 Protestant dissenters are executed, and she has what, at least from the English people I talk to, is considered to be kind of an unfortunate reign. She's not popular in England. Is that a correct statement, Jean?
I would say so.
Referred to as Bloody Mary.